Hello everybody, I'm Tom Brassington, a PhD student in the Department of English Literature and Creative Writing at Lancaster University. This workshop looks at Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet and the notoriety it has as the greatest love story ever told. I'll be spending this workshop establishing some contextual frames to consider that claim against. This workshop was originally a single video, but when I was timing it, it went on a little bit too long, so I'm now splitting it into a two-part video, hence the background changes that we'll usually see at the start and end of the video, since the majority of this was filmed in my office and these pieces were filmed in my home office. Part one of the workshop will introduce the contextual frames that we consider Romeo and Juliet as part of, this sort of ongoing story of star-crossed lovers, as well as the notion of courtly love, specifically looking at how courtly language is used in dialogue between and about Romeo and Juliet. Part two expands that notion by using examples from the play that are not strictly to do with romantic sentiment between our two main characters. So thank you for clicking on this video, and I hope you enjoy it. The play's prologue refers to Romeo and Juliet as a pair of star-crossed lovers, referring to the idea that the two are destined to be together. Shakespeare did not invent this trope, and it appears that it is one of the oldest types of tale in our recorded history. Here I've outlined a brief list of similar stories which engage with the same themes and could have inspired Romeo and Juliet. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, a collection of stories of transformation that attempt to creatively explain the sort of way the world is, there is the tale of Pyramus and Thisbe. In this tale, Pyramus and Thisbe are two lovers in the city of Babylon who occupy connected houses but have been forbidden by their parents to be wed. Through a crack in the adjoining wall, the two arrange to meet under a mulberry tree near the mythical founder of Babylon's tomb. Thisbe arrives first and sees a lioness covered in blood from a recent kill. She flees, losing her cloak in the process. When Pyramus arrives, he sees the sight and thinks that Thisbe has been killed by the lioness, and kills himself by falling on his sword, splatters of blood staining the mulberry leaves. Thisbe returns, mourns the death of Pyramus, and kills herself on the same sword. Hearing her lamentations, the gods permanently change the colour of the mulberry fruits into the blood-stained colour they have, in honour of the love the two shared. You can see a lot of the themes and motifs this story shares with Romeo and Juliet. Close to Shakespeare's time are a series of Italian texts which were incredibly popular upon translation throughout Western Europe. Matteo Bandella's Novelle was translated and partially inspired Arthur Brooks' The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet, and William Painter's The Palace of Pleasure in the 16th century. What we have by the time of Shakespeare's play is an incredibly popular story, Italian in origin at this point in history, effectively being made available through theatre to a much wider audience who would have been predominantly illiterate then. So Romeo and Juliet sees the dripping down of a story to the masses who wouldn't be able to read, as opposed to the reading population. So this sort of begs the question of, why is this type of story so captivating? It clearly has something to it which captures our collective interest. Some of its qualities are captivating, and I want to propose that part of this captivation lies in its main characters being teenagers. As characters, they are hormonal and emotionally volatile. This is something which Capulet remarks on in Act 1, Scene 2, noting that he and Montague do not find it difficult to keep the peace, implying by contrast that it is the young who will struggle to maintain peace. Compare this small remark with what Romeo says when he sees Juliet for the first time. To him, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. She has beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. This woman who he has just met is the most beautiful thing he has ever laid eyes on. There's a lot of emotionally charged language in these lines compared to the simplistic and direct language Capulet uses in the earlier scene quoted on this slide. At the center of these stories are two rash, impulsive characters whose actions are guided by feelings rather than thought, and that is a very fun thing for us as the audience to engage in. There's something sort of almost, I guess, primal about it. If these extremes and immediate levels of feeling are part of what makes the play captivating, then there must be other parts of the play which engage in similar expressions, other parts of the play which are extravagant beyond reason in their expression, or are incredibly or borderlining on melodramatic. So I would like for you now to pause the video and engage with the following exercise. First, find another example of immediate and extreme levels of feeling expressed by a character in the play. Then, perform some close analysis using the following questions to help guide your thinking. What qualities does the expression you found and Romeo's exclamation from the previous slide about Juliet's beauty share? Are there any notable differences, and what are they? Why might these characters be portrayed to experience the emotions identified? Why are they feeling these feelings so intensely? Okay, pause the video to do this exercise. Okay, now that you're thinking more about feelings, emotions, and how they're expressed in the play, let's consider some reasons for why Romeo and Juliet is so fond of metaphors, similes, and euphemisms. Often, Romeo and Juliet is referred to as the greatest love story ever told. Part of this is true, and the historical record demonstrated how recurrent the story of fated yet doomed lovers is. However, is Romeo and Juliet specifically just a love story, or would it be better characterized as a tale of lust and desire rather than love, or in addition to love? I say this because the play's language is not lovely so much as it is engaging with a specific literary convention known as courtly love. Now, courtly love was a literary invention of medieval romance tales, which nobility of the period were really keen on. It was a genre that they particularly enjoyed. These stories and tales of knights going on adventures, of heroism and getting princesses and maidens along the way. However, we do not know how much real adventuring like this was done. We have no sort of way to know how accurate to life these stories might be, or if they're based on anything rooted in truth and human experience. So it is better to think of these tropes as part of a set of literary conventions rather than reflective of the sort of culture of a time. Whilst medieval nobility were really into this genre of storytelling, the popularity of courtly love romances expanded throughout the Middle Ages, and by Shakespeare's times, courtly love and its generic conventions would be commonplace. A specific aspect of courtly love genre conventions concerned a specific type of action portrayed by its character, which James A. Schultz argues that courtly culture elaborated a class-specific ideal of social life that required a certain self-restraint, at table, in speech, in response to insult or challenge, and promising distinction in return. So effectively, it's a sort of social code where, in being restrained in their mannerisms, characters would garner favor. So in tales, this might come across as the maiden winning over the maiden's heart, gaining a title, or defeating a monstrous foe. So part of courtly love's linguistic conventions was not speaking plainly, of using language, as I called these slides, cloaked in metaphor. To be restrained in speech, as Schultz says, was to use extended metaphors to speak around sensitive topics. In these stories, knights would use metaphors when stating their desires to maidens. Maidens responded by either continuing with the metaphor raised or not, by pretending that they did not understand what the person's going on about. Continuing the metaphor effectively said that she reciprocated the knight's desires. So the linguistic convention of courtly love effectively acted as a kind of consent system that enabled knights to save face should they be rejected, because the maiden simply misunderstood, rather than saying she did not find this knight to be a suitable sexual or romantic partner. With this in mind, there is always an erotic, amorous component to the language of courtly love. Indeed, F.X. Newman describes courtly love as a doctrine of paradoxes, a love at once illicit and morally elevating, passionate and disciplined, humiliating and exalting, human and transcendent. Because the maidens and the knights would talk using, say, religious metaphors, they are at once expressing their sexual desire, cloaked in the metaphor of religious imagery, and contemplating lofty religious thought because they're using religious imagery. There's two things happening at the same time that don't necessarily go together, hence a doctrine of paradoxes. And we can see one example of the extended metaphor within courtly love in this extract, split across this and the next slide from Act 1, Scene 5. Here, Romeo begins using language relating to religion and the action of pilgrimage. Juliet, we see, returns and continues the metaphor, indicating she understands and reciprocates Romeo's cloaked desires. In the middle, it appears that Juliet is trying to create distance between her and Romeo by suggesting alternatives to them kissing, but she ultimately affirms his desires only to give a snarky little retort at the end, which is here on this slide when she says, "You kiss by the book." It both continues the pilgrimage and biblical metaphor from the previous slide and acts as a sort of closing retort. Okay, having seen an example of this extended metaphor, I would like you now to pause the video and find another example in Romeo and Juliet. Use the following questions to help with your close analysis of the extract you find. What metaphors are being used? What are the characters really talking about? Are these metaphors similar or different to what is used in the exchange between Romeo and Juliet on the previous slides? Why is the metaphor in your extract being used in this moment? Okay, I would like you now to pause the video and return when you have done this close reading exercise. So thank you for listening, participating and taking part in part 1 of this workshop on Romeo and Juliet and courtly love. I hope you found it useful, and here is the link to part 2, which will work to expand our understanding of how courtly language is used in the play. Whether or not you're going on to part 2 of this workshop, or if you came from part 2, or however you came across this workshop, thank you for watching, listening and participating in it. If you're interested in learning more about what it's like to study English literature and/or creative writing at university, you can start with our website. Feel free to contact us with questions using the contact information presented on the slide in front of you. Thank you.